It is 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended news review and press preview. Our top story.
How are you keeping people motivated to deliver the support and the humanitarian work you're doing in such conditions?
Too many have been killed. The heir to the throne joins the calls for an end to the fighting in Gaza. The fear fueling a focus on the need for a ceasefire as America, as well as the Labour Party here, shift their stance. And the youngest victims of the hatred following the October the 7th attacks. The investigation after a baby's birth certificate was defaced.
Now the situation over here is not good. To be a Jew in the UK, to be a Jewish in the UK is very hard nowadays.
Also tonight, hope for the Nottingham victims' families as the killer's jail term is sent for review. Also tonight, the end of the search for the Alkali attacker as police believe they found his body in the River Thames. Well, over the next hour, we will be discussing today's news with our reviewers, Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda. And then later we'll have a full run-through for you of tomorrow's front pages. Hello there, good evening. The pressure for a ceasefire in Gaza is growing on both sides of the Atlantic tonight. At the United Nations, America again vetoed an attempt to demand an immediate ceasefire, but for the first time, it signalled it could put its own resolution calling for a temporary cessation in fighting. And here in the UK, both the likely next government and the heir to the throne appeared to join those calls. Prince William making what appeared to be a calculated intervention, saying that too many have been killed and that fighting must end as soon as possible. Well, over the next hour, we will bring you tonight's headlines, tomorrow's front pages, and the views of our paper reviewers, the broadcaster and commentator, Ali Miraj, and the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda. But first, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has this report.
The royal face of a growing public outcry.
Health system that is totally collapsed.
Prince William hearing first-hand accounts of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The future king making a rare and significant intervention into global politics.
How are you keeping spirits up in your organisation? How are you keeping people motivated to deliver the support and the humanitarian work you're doing in such conditions?
This visit to the British Red Cross followed a strongly worded statement from the Prince of Wales. He said he is deeply concerned about the terrible human cost of the conflict, that there is a desperate need for increased humanitarian support, and called for an end to the fighting as soon as possible. The Prince, not the only major public intervention in this crisis today. In Westminster, the Labour Party has faced weeks of internal strife about its position on the conflict. Now, a new stance backing an immediate ceasefire.
We have set down a motion calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
I'm a bit confused. Are you saying that Israel can't use its armed forces now to try and secure the release of the hostages?
It's really important. A humanitarian ceasefire that's immediate requires both sides to lay down their arms.
I'm still confused. Are you saying that targeted action can be taken by Israel to release hostages, to free hostages, or not?
We are calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire which requires both sides to lay down their arms.
The Foreign Secretary commemorating the war dead in the Falklands. The government says no permanent ceasefire can happen until all Israeli hostages are released.
We think that what we need is a pause in the fighting and the hostages to come out and aid to go in. That should happen straight away. Then what we need to do is to turn that pause into a permanent, sustainable ceasefire. Now, lots of things will have to happen in order for that to be the case and for fighting not to resume.
For months, the two main parties have been in lockstep in their position towards Israel and Gaza. But as of today, no longer. After weeks of pain and contortion, the Labour Party's changed its stance, now telling Israel to stop fighting. A new position they adopted just a day before the SNP put the issue to a divisive vote. And it comes amid signs of a wider shift in the EU and the US, and closer to home.
Too many have been killed, said Prince William today, who is planning more engagements to highlight the human suffering caused by this war on both sides in the weeks to come. Neither royal nor political interventions are that likely to change what happens in this conflict. Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, a number of tomorrow's newspapers certainly leading on Prince William's intervention. There is the Daily Mail, leads with Prince William's concerns, as he says too many people have died in the Gaza conflict. This in the Times too, Prince issues Gaza plea for a permanent peace. And the Daily Mirror also featuring Prince William's comments, "In the darkest hour, I cling to the hope a brighter future can be found." But let's get the thoughts then of the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj, the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda as well. Ali, you kick off. Was it right, do you think, for the heir to the throne to speak out like this?
Well, I think he clearly is very passionate about the issue, as many, many people up and down the country are. I think he speaks for many when he's come out with this. He's talked about the huge loss of human life. He's talked about the desire for the fighting to end now. He did not use the word ceasefire. He's also alluding to the fact that aid should be getting in to the people who have been displaced, the 1.5 million people who've been displaced from their homes. He also referred to the loss of life on the Israeli side, not only at the time, but also today. So I think he's trying to get the balance right. But I do think in a highly emotive, very, very charged atmosphere, the heir to the throne needs to be very, very careful. It's like walking through a minefield, this thing. I think he's probably just on the right side of the balance. Number 10, I'm not sure if they were aware of this or not. They're clearly backing it. The Israeli government is also kind of welcoming his words as the chief rabbi, but it's very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of take a different view, I suppose, in the sense that I do think that he stayed firmly on the right side of the line with this one, because his statement is very high level. Some people might interpret it as a call for an immediate ceasefire, but actually when you look at what he's saying that he hopes that the fighting ends soon. And I mean, who would disagree with that? Who would disagree with the fact that too many people have died in this region, in this conflict? You know, it's sort of terrible what we've seen. And so I sort of think when you actually look at what he said, he's expressing a kind of humanitarian instinct. And
yes, that's true.
It really isn't as political as you might think at first glance. He doesn't use the word ceasefire. Now, of course, some people may look at it and see a call for a ceasefire kind of embedded in there, but he really doesn't talk about the politics of the situation. He doesn't, he's even-handed. He talks about the importance of Hamas releasing all the hostages. He's not sort of saying these are exactly the conditions. You know, he's not getting involved. He's just sort of talking on a humanitarian level. So I sort of think, I think he has stayed on the right line, and I can't imagine that he would have done this if Downing Street had said, no, this is going to be problematic. So I sort of think it's high level enough that it's okay, and it's not too political an intervention.
Well, the language is certainly critical, as we will see from Parliament tomorrow, which we'll come on to. Also in New York, because today America vetoed another attempt at the United Nations to call for a ceasefire, but it has drafted a new call to oppose any further advance by Israel in Gaza.
We look forward to engaging on a text that we believe will address so many of the concerns we all share, a text that can and should be adopted by the Council so that we can have a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable based on the formula of all hostages being released. This temporary ceasefire is critical to getting aid into the hands of Palestinian civilians who desperately need it.
Yeah, and Ali, it's hard to interpret how significant this slight shift in US policy is and where it might go next.
Well, it might be, but it might not be, you see, because Benjamin Netanyahu is really in a hole. He's got a bunch of corruption charges that he's facing. He's a very desperate man. He knows that the only way to remain in power is to keep this war going. Yes, he's under a lot of pressure domestically, especially from the families of the hostages, to release those, get those 134 hostages released. That should be the priority. He's also under a lot of pressure from the extreme right-wing elements on his own coalition side, who actually want to see this as a pretext for Israel to expand settlement activity in Gaza, as it's doing in the West Bank, which is really quite beyond the pale at this point of time. I mean, you just saw a few weeks ago this rally that took place in Israel with people cheering to the rafters. I mean, you wouldn't have thought there was a war going on with thousands of people being killed on either side here. But anyway, some people think it is their God-given right, genuinely, to go and settle this land and to push out the Gazans. Where are they going to go? I find it disgraceful. We need calm heads to prevail here. This has to be a situation where the US, yes, it's putting pressure, but what will really happen? If Netanyahu ignores Biden, what will Biden do?
And this is the front page of the Financial Times. Up the top, their picture story. The picture is of near the Lebanese port of Sidon. And they say the US is circulating a UN Security Council draft resolution warning Israel against a major ground offensive into Rafah. And the whole point about that is it's right on the Egyptian border. It's where many people have fled to and many people were told to flee to. And the question is, will there be arrangements put in place to move them away from the area as Israel seeks to root out Hamas and root out the tunnels and their infrastructure and their systems?
Well, if this security resolution, UN security resolution passes, and even the fact that the US is circulating it, this is a significant toughening up in the stance of the US towards Israel. We know that the US, behind the scenes, to some extent publicly, has been urging restraint from Benjamin Netanyahu to date. This is a step up in that. It would be really quite significant, I think. So you've got that public diplomacy effort, as we were discussing in the 10:30 segment as well. You've also got a lot of behind-the-scenes diplomacy that's being, with states like, Gulf states like Qatar, very, very involved. In terms of any chance of getting towards a sustainable ceasefire, it really, we will come on to talking about motions in the UK Parliament.
Let's do it, shall we?
This is but really, it is these conversations that are being brokered that will really count in terms of, can we get Hamas to release the hostages? Can we get a pause in Israel's offensive against Gaza, and can we start some talks?
Yes, so we've had Prince William's intervention, what's happening at the UN Security Council and what America's doing about it. Now to domestic politics here in the UK, a vote expected tomorrow, pushed by the SNP under an opposition motion. Labour tabled its own amendment, then the government snuck in and tabled its own amendment, which might mean that the Labour remember won't get picked. Sounds complicated, but anyway, the nuts and bolts of it is, what does Labour think about this war? How far will they go? And will Sir Keir Starmer, also see a revolt in his own party, despite their attempt to move closer to some of the rebellious MPs' views on it?
Well, I do think the Labour position is shifting, and it's shifting because it's under immense pressure. Now, until this point, the Labour position has been that there will be there should be a sustainable ceasefire, which is basically what the government's been saying, what Lord Cameron's been saying, which effectively is code for the fact that you can't have a ceasefire